The other legacy of economic domination is political suppression and unspeakable atrocities. The counterinsurgency funded and led by the United States in El Salvador against a broadly based liberation movement led to the deaths of what? By now maybe 70,000 Salvadorans killed. Many thousands more believed to have been murdered by right-wing death squads. 540,000 have fled into exile. Another 250,000 have been displaced or forced into resettlement camps. This is all one little country, El Salvador, a country of only 4 million people. But just about everybody has been directly or indirectly affected, has either suffered death or suffered a terrible loss of loved ones or close ones. The Salvadoran army massacred whole villages suspected of being sympathetic to the guerrillas. An eyewitness victim interview taken by then Congresswoman Barbara Mikulski of a Salvadoran peasant woman. Quote, "Many members of my family were killed. I saw children around the age of 8 being raped, and then the soldiers would take their bayonets and make mincemeat out of them. With their guns they would shoot at their faces. The army cut people up and put soap and coffee in their stomachs as a mocking. They would slit the stomach of a pregnant woman and take the child out as if they were taking eggs out of an iguana. That is what I saw." And El Salvador today, in the U.S. media and by our U.S. political leaders, is called a democracy. Manuel de Conceição, a peasant leader in Brazil, was arrested by the Brazilian security police when the junta ran Brazil. Police who had been schooled at U.S. Army bases in the latest methods of counterinsurgency and interrogation for his crime of protesting the economic conditions of his life and of his people. This is how Manuel was treated. "For 4 months I was heavily tortured by the army in Rio de Janeiro and then in the Naval Information Center. Near death I was taken to the hospital for the 6th time. The beatings had been so severe that my body was one big bruise. The blood clotted under my skin and all the hair on my body fell out. They pulled out all my fingernails. They poked needles through my sexual organs and used a rope to drag me across the floor by my testicles. Right afterwards they hung me upside down by my ankles. They hung me handcuffed from a grating and tied my penis so I could not urinate. They forced me to stand for 3 days without food or drink. They gave me so many drugs that my eardrums burst and I am impotent. They nailed my penis to a table for 24 hours. They tied me up like a pig and threw me into a pool so that I nearly drowned. They put me in a completely dark cell where I remained for 30 days, urinating and defecating in the same place where I had to sleep. They fed me only bread soaked in water. They put me in a rubber box and turned on a siren. For 3 days I neither ate nor slept, and I nearly went mad." This was done by the defenders of the Western world, by defenders of the free way, you see, the free market, with the aid and the training of the CIA and other such groups. Victims of these military and police defenders of democracy were financed by the U.S., tortured people with electric shock. They forced victims, and this is in El Salvador and in Guatemala, Honduras, not in Panama, not in Nicaragua, not in Cuba. These are the things. They forced victims to witness the torture of friends and relatives, including children. They raped women in the presence of other family members. They burned sexual organs with acid or scalding water. They placed rats in women's vaginas and into the mouths of other prisoners. They mutilated, punctured, and cut off various parts of the body, including genitalia, eyes, and tongue. They injected air into women's breasts and into veins, causing slow, painful death. They shoved bayonets and clubs into the vagina, or in the case of men, into the anus, causing rupture and death. And I have other descriptions that make that one look almost mild, but I'm going to skip them. I think you get the idea. Yet I would argue that imperialism is rational. It harnesses these cruel and horrible and twisted impulses. It enlists them. It instigates them. It instigates them. These guys weren't born torturers. I mean, they didn't go around and say, who's been ripping out the arms of rabbits and chickens? You can come work for us. They took ordinary guys and said, we are going to train you as professionals. And torturers have testified that we are professionals. We use certain methods to elicit information, and we have to do this, and it's a tough job and all that. And the guys who finance them, who sit in Langley, Virginia, say, heck, I mean, it's a jungle out there. I'm not that happy about the kind of methods we sometimes have to use, but when you're facing these tough kind of people, you got to use the same methods they do, and so forth, so on. In other words, you always justify your crimes by saying that your victim was the criminal. That's a rational process of training torturers for what is a rational set of interests. They didn't go down there for torturing, just for the sake of torturing. They used torture in order to be down there and stay down there and defend their privileges and their interests. I want to make that point because sometimes imperial domination is explained as arising from the will to dominate, an innate desire for territorial expansion, a territorial imperative. But in fact, territorial imperialism is not the dominant mode. It hasn't been in generations. Today, there's very relatively little colonial dominion. I mean, the U.S. controls Puerto Rico, Guam, a few other places. What you have today is neo-imperialism, where the country has its nominal independence, its own president and its own currency and its own police and all that, and all you do is you control its exports and imports, its land, as we did with Cuba, with sugar, tobacco, its tourist trade, and all those other things. You allow them the trappings of sovereignty while you control the wealth.